everybody. This will be a virtual meeting with remote attendance by councillors and remote access of press and public, and will be held in accordance with the provisions of the local authorities and police and crime coronavirus flexibility of local authorities and police and crime panel meetings, England and Wales, regulations 2020. Just like to welcome everybody who's here. I think Andy Thomas would like us to do a roll call. So I'll go around the members first. Steve Watt?
Yes, present.
Dan Marcus?
Present.
Sorry. Councillor Legg?
Yes, present.
Councillor Williams?
Present.
Councillor Smith?
Present.
And Councillor Sims?
Present.
Do you want to know the other people as well, Andy?
Yes, Chairman, I think we should, so the people listening can know who's on the call.
Right, okay. Our Chief Executive, Paul Masters.
Present.
Senior Manager for Strategic Development, Nicholas Stinson. Present. Senior Officer for Strategic Development, Keith Grossett.
Good morning, present.
Community Venture, Jim Wrigley.
Present.
John Wybrow, Hitachi.
Good morning, present.
Good morning. Jason Carr.
They'll join the meeting later, Chairman.
Okay, and Neil Hamilton, join later.
Correct.
Officer for Policy and Scrutiny, Bob Dawson.
Present.
And yourself, Andy.
Very much present, thank you.
Thank you. I have some apologies. Mike Nellums, apologies. Ashton Khan, Russell Ashman, Stephen Taylor, Tracy Langley from Cornwall Council, and Becky Lloyd King from Cornwall Council. All their apologies are in. When we come to doing the voting, we'll take silence as a yes vote. Right.
Chairman, can I just
Yes?
ask if there's anybody else on the call who hasn't been made themselves aware of being present?
Yes, certainly. Anybody else there?
Yes, Robert Francis, Chairman of Council.
Thank you, Robert.
And Fran Grotek, observing Vice Chair of Council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Could we have any declarations of interest, please? No declarations of interest. Could we have the...
Chairman, can I declare an interest, please?
Yes, certainly. Sorry. Yes.
I was a recipient of a relatively small amount of BEES funding, but the project is now concluded, my project and the wider project, so I'm planning to participate in the meeting.
Yeah. And that goes for me as well, actually, I forgot about that. Right.
Chairman, I received a small amount of BEES funding as well.
Okay.
But likewise, the project is concluded.
Thank you very much. Right, we take the minutes of the last meeting, please. I take it that everybody's read the minutes. Are there any comments to make on the minutes? Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Sims.
I'm having to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Sims. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. All those in favour? Anybody against? Thank you. I have no urgent items. We now go to agenda item number 4. I've just got a few things to say before we start on this. The Council is committed to climate change, and I sit on the working group, as do many of the Scrutiny members. It is becoming well established, and terms of reference are being drawn up. We also welcome the Adaptive City project in terms of coastal erosion. Today we are looking at a programme that has generated considerable public interest over the past few years, receiving both support and criticism on social media. As a council, we approved the Smart Islands programme within the council's capital programme and the projects that sit beneath it. We tend to rely on external funding for projects that as a council we feel are important for the community and the islands. It is important that this committee fulfills its responsibilities and receive relevant reports such as this one, so that an in-depth and transparent discussion can take place in public. I'd just like to explain, Councillor Smith and Councillor Sims will not be asking questions. They will be able to comment as they have a conflict of interest. Councillor Sims sits on the Smart Islands Partnership, and Councillor Smith is the lead member of the Smart Islands. And I will be asking them to comment, and they will also be here to answer any questions any members have. I would like to ask Senior Manager for Strategic Development, Nicholas Stinson, to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. You'll see from the report before you today that it looks both backwards and forwards. It looks at the lessons learnt so far and our achievements so far, and it looks at the challenges ahead. So let's start with past, because that always informs the future, doesn't it? So in May 2015, the Council of the Isles of Scilly signed a Memorandum of Understanding alongside a number of key partners forming the Smart Islands Partnership. And the purpose of that memorandum was to deliver smart energy solutions and new technologies on the Isles of Scilly. And the ambition and a number of targets were set, and these are documented for you in the report. Delivery to meet these ambitions centred around a number of projects. Not all were through, but 3 key projects were funded and delivered. The Smart Energy Islands project led by John Wybrow of Hitachi, who's here today. Business Energy Efficiency Scheme led by Keith Grossett here at the Council. And the Electric Vehicle and Charging Infrastructure project, GoEV, led by Jim Wrigley of the Community Venture on behalf of the Council. All 3 project managers are here today to take your questions. Other projects were explored, including an energy from waste plant, but that was discounted following feasibility work and a report presented for the business case to the Council. Other opportunities are still being explored. The bulk of this report looks at the outputs and outcomes of those projects and the lessons learned so far, so that can help inform the way we work in the future. And the future's changing, isn't it? And since 2015, things have changed a lot. And in April 2019, the Council itself declared a climate emergency and sought to achieve a zero carbon council by 2030. And whilst the Smart Islands programme is part of that solution, the scope of the work required to achieve this new ambition is much broader. We're seeing more projects and activities outside of the Smart Islands programme now being taken forward. For example, we're working collaboratively with Cornwall Council to retrofit energy efficiency measures to more of our homes. And we have European and Environment Agency funding to deliver the Adaptive Cities project to help respond to climate change. Within the Council itself, we're reshaping to ensure we maximise the opportunity to embed zero carbon and provide a climate change focus. And this will impact on how we deliver our services to the community in the future. And one of the questions we'll have to deal with as we move forward is what role the Council is willing and able to play in achieving these challenging ambitions. As a starting point, we'll be ensuring we have a clear climate change strategy and action plan. So the details of the projects that are in the report, the team are here today and happy to take questions you may have on all the projects that have been delivered so far and those that haven't. Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Nicola. I'd like to ask Councillor Smith if he has any comments to make.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks for the report, Nicola, and your introductory statement there. I think that really sums it up quite well. I just want to sort of have a quick look back over the project. I think it's worth recognising that Smart Islands is a programme that attracted international attention, certainly for its approach, its integration and its innovation. And it's something we should be proud of in that sense. Smart Energy Islands has a direct legacy of renewable energy and energy management systems in council houses. So that's clearly a good thing for us and the council and for our tenants. It's also delivered a significant service to businesses to advise on improving energy efficiency. We've also seen solar PV installations at the airport and on other council buildings. This is a good legacy. The BEES project really took that forward from the businesses, enabling them to actually install renewable energy and energy efficiency measures. It was very popular, it was oversubscribed, and it's now virtually finished. And we hope that in the future there might be some more funding to enable more businesses to take part in this, because there's clearly a demand there, which is a really good thing. GoEV is now really coming to fruition. With charging points going in, EV cars on the islands, and solar canopies being installed. And interestingly, during this project, the government actually announced that all new cars must not be petrol or diesel from 2030. And this is very significant, and it just proves that actually a charging infrastructure will be required everywhere, including on the islands. So we're quite a step ahead there in that sense. I think on a project of this scale and ambition, there will always be things that didn't go to plan. There are lessons to be learned, and I think they've been laid out in the report. It's important to log these, and important to approach projects differently in the future, and I'm confident they will be. But I think we mustn't underestimate the impacts that Smart Islands programme has had, and it's something very positive as we move towards a zero-carbon world. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'm going to go around the members first to ask what questions they have, and I'm sorry, Vice Chairman, Councillor Grottick, I forgot to welcome you to this item. We've asked Councillor Grottick to come and put her questions to the panel, and she will be doing that later on. I'd like to start with Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I share Councillor Smith's sentiment on much of what he said. Smart Islands was designed to be innovative, so I think it's very important we recognise there was always going to be an element of risk and an element of reward. It was trying to find that balance, and with hindsight, we can all find comments which we would have done differently. I do find it disappointing that some of the headline aspirations weren't achieved, particularly around fuel poverty. Our fuel poverty figures locally are very poor, and I was certainly hoping we would have been able to rectify that more than we have done. For me, though, the greatest regret is probably how the community has engaged with the project. I think the majority of the community, whether you're talking to them face-to-face or on social media, have never really bought into some of the concepts. And I don't think, to be honest, they're actually being given many opportunities to from the outset. I think those early days was a lost opportunity. And that's perhaps created a sense of mistrust and a degree of cynicism. And I think that's certainly something I would like us to take forward in the future in our learning. That if we want that buy-in, we've really got to facilitate it from day one. Trying to come in too late down the pathway is just trying to play catch up, and it's not really worked. There are clearly positive outcomes, and I think we should be proud of those, and we should celebrate those as much as we can. The BEES project, I think, has been very successful, and all the solar panels and photovoltaics on council houses and other areas has been good. In the report, at some future date, I'd like to know a little bit more about the outcomes for our tenants. Some case studies about how their life may have benefited from the solar panels, how their financial status improved. The information in the report was a little vague, I felt. It was saying that some did, some didn't, but I didn't really get a feel whether we were talking 80 or 90% were finding it very good or 80 or 90% weren't finding it very good. For me, the business case around the community venture is perhaps the most concerning bit, and perhaps we can explore that today. Some of the historic estimates I read in the report are just way away from reality. I guess there's got to be a question, was the feasibility study on whether the anaerobic digester and gasifier would actually work done before some of the estimates on what it would generate were produced? It's, as I said, it's almost embarrassing how far we are off the mark on that particular thing. I appreciate the comments Nicola's made about some of the targets for Go EV, but for me the ultimate test has got to be, is it used by the general public? And I totally get that we've had COVID and all sorts of other things, but I think we probably need to explore this morning a bit more about when it will be available to the wider market. A little bit disappointed again by some of the vehicles, and again that might be market choice, but I was hoping we might be looking at more vehicles suitable for taking some of the dirty, bulky, messy stuff. When I talk to clients, sometimes they've got things you really wouldn't want to put in some of the vans which I've seen. It wouldn't be a great sort of fit, but again, that can perhaps be explored. I've no doubt there is a place for the community venture and a community interest company, but I think we've got to really nail down its purpose, and there's some amended recommendations which perhaps will allow us to think about that in due course. But I really want a clear purpose of what that organisation is going to be doing. I want it to stand on its own 2 feet. For me, there are times when it's difficult to see where the council's roles and responsibilities end and the community ventures begin. It all looks, from the outside, it looks a little bit close. I'd like a little bit more differentiation between those two. But certainly I would like to thank Nicola and her team for adding much better community engagement and member engagement over the past 12, 18 months. I would go to say it was sadly lacking until that point. And again, that didn't help with member buy-in, let alone community buy-in. So I welcome that. I do have a few questions which I can list. In paragraph 34, it talks about the solar sites passing to community venture. I was wondering if, when they pass to the community venture, whether all maintenance repair costs go with that. There's no mention of solar panels on the sports hall roof that I could see in the report, and an update on where we are with that would be appreciated. As I said earlier, where we are with the car share scheme launching to the general public would be good. And also things around fees and charges for the scheme and the charging points, a bit more clarity on that, and whether it's up to council to set fees and charges would be helpful. Again, I just also want to apologise, or not apologise, is probably the wrong word, but I'm conscious there are community venture staff here and probably listening in. And it's probably not the nicest conversation to be listening to when we're talking about the organisation they've probably worked very hard to work for. But I guess it's something we, as a scrutiny board, just need to dig a little bit deeper into. And finally, Chairman, there have been all sorts of emails bouncing around over the last 24 hours, the last 2 or 3 minutes, so around revised recommendations. So would it be an appropriate juncture for me to read out what members and officers have been developing in terms of revised recommendations for today's meeting?
Yes, that would, Councillor Williams. Yeah.
I think I'm working from the most recent version. Until about 30 seconds before I came into this meeting, there was various other versions bouncing around, so Paul might be able to help if this is not the right version. But the recommendations I've got here are: the Council and all members are fully engaged and informed in the formulation and commissioning of any future schemes at the scale of the Smart Islands project. Formal approval for such schemes is reserved to Council in order that there can be full understanding of the risks and assumptions made, especially in projects of an innovative and transformation nature. The Chief Executive establishes a corporate approach to project management and progress reporting to members and our community to further improve the Council's performance management arrangements. And a detailed business case is brought back to full Council by October 2021 on the Go EV project, which will include consideration of the interlinked viability and purpose of the CIC, which will also clarify the future liability of the Council in relation to any associated assets.
Right, thank
you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams, for those. At the end of the discussion, we will do a proposal and on those recommendations. First of all, who would you like to answer your questions, Councillor Williams? Nicola, are you going to take it?
Yeah, shall I start off around the repair and maintenance issues that you raise around the solar PV as we pass them on the commercial sites and the sports hall, and then I'll pass on to Jim to answer around the car share and the business case for the car share, if that's okay with you, Chairman. So the arrangement with the asset transfer for the commercial sites is that they take the costs and the benefits. So when they transfer over to the community venture take with them the repair and maintenance liabilities as well as the income from that solar. So they take the burden as well as the reward. So that's quite clear, and that's within the asset transfer document and the licence. The bigger challenge, I think, has been the sports hall roof. So this isn't part of the Smart Islands programme. These were solar panels that were erected on the sports hall roof when that replacement building was put there. We've had an issue with the inverter, and that needs replacing by the looks of it. It's a German part that we've been waiting for, and that's been unable to be accessed through the period of COVID. In looking at that issue, we've also come across some further issues around the roof and the attachment to those panels to the roof. So it's suddenly become a bit more of a problem because we're not entirely sure whether those panels are actually damaging the roof itself. And until we can gain access to the roof and get contractors over, we can't get to the bottom of the problem. So you'll still have to bear with me on that one, I'm afraid. It's on the priority list. As soon as we can get people over, they'll be looking at that as an issue. But it's not just the inverter that needs resolving. We just need to check that the structure of the roof hasn't been damaged or if it doesn't need repairing at the same time. So there's a couple of issues that have come out of the exploration of that problem that have mushroomed it into something slightly bigger than what we originally thought it was, which was a spare part for the inverter. So that has mushroomed a little bit, but it is on our top priority of issues to be resolved in the coming months. So as soon as we can get someone over, we will. I hope that answers those two questions. I'm going to pass over to Jim to talk to you about the business case for the car share, the setting of the fees and charges, etc.
Thank you, Nicola. So, yes, Joel, I just want to answer a question you didn't actually ask in your questions, but in your statement before about the types of vehicles. Just wanted to reassure members and Scrutiny that we will have 3 panel vans as part of the project. So these will be suitable for taking waste down to the waste site by members of the public. In fact, we have 2 of those on island already, and a further one will be coming in April. So just to reassure you that there are other types of vehicles that will enable that to happen. In terms of sort of a go-live date, we are restricted in a number of ways. The programme has been delayed by COVID in actually installing the chargers. We have also experienced delays in actually getting the vehicles here. So despite placing orders for the vehicles in September, many of them have not yet arrived, and they're due to arrive. We've got one more arriving later this month, and then some more arriving in April. So the combination of not having the vehicles and not having the chargers is what has delayed us launching the scheme fully. We've currently got 5 vehicles and 3 chargers, and we're already having to juggle keeping all those vehicles charged to keep up with the use on the vehicles. But obviously, once we've got the charging network in place, which will be in place by the end of this month, and more vehicles coming, we'll be able to station the vehicles where they're due to go. The other bit that we're doing at the moment is, you'll hopefully remember from reports that I've sent out, that there will be a car sharing app that people will be able to book the vehicles. We're currently going user acceptance testing on that app with ourselves within the community venture and the project team. But also, in the next couple of weeks, we'll start doing that with members of the staff at the council who are using the vehicles to make sure we've got that proper customer journey ironed out before we start to launch it to the public. And in terms of the fees, we anticipate that the fees will be yet to completely be finalised, but what we're zoning in on is an hourly rate of £6 an hour for the vehicles. We're not differentiating a rate between the different vehicles. because we felt that someone may want a car, for example, but a car might not be available, and a van might be there instead to suit their needs. So we're keeping the rates the same for all vehicles. So £6 an hour is in line with car share schemes that we've seen on the mainland, but we do hope to be able, certainly during the project time, to have an introductory offer at something like half that rate to encourage people to join the scheme to start with.
Thanks, Jim. Are you able to give a bit more indication of when the scheme will be up? I take your point about the vehicles not hearing the charging points, but are we talking April or September or?
April. I would imagine. I'm hopeful that by the end of April we will have got the charging infrastructure installed and a number of vehicles here, and have completed our user acceptance testing. So certainly way before September. Yeah, end of April is what we're looking at.
That's all. Councillor Williams, are you satisfied with your answer?
That's all from me for the time being. Thank you. Yes.
Just while we're on the electric cars, I have a question from Councillor Dean to ask, and one on the. I'll do the electric cars first, as we're on that at the moment. One of the outcomes of this project was that it would give the community venture an income from the hiring of cars. Has this happened? Would you like to answer that one, Jim?
Well, the short answer is no, because we haven't launched the scheme yet.
Right, okay. And on the electricity, I don't know whether John Wybrow would like to answer this question. The electricity in 2015, it was one of the outcomes from the electric tariffs was a 20% reduction in the electric tariff. Has this happened? I think not, because I think there was trouble, but I think the public would like you to explain to them why it hasn't happened.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Yes, I can answer that question. If I may, I'd just like to say thank you to the council members and the public on the Isles of Scilly for allowing us to do the Smart Energy Islands project. And I do take Councillor Williams's points, and I'm sure thoughts from the rest of you that some things went well and some things didn't go so well. So yes, there are a number of lessons learned that we take on board, but overall we feel quite proud of the project and what we were able to achieve, and we did try and balance that tricky innovation element that effectively won us the funding with doing something that was good for the Isles of Scilly and produced a legacy and inspired the people and particularly the children on the islands. The target for reducing electricity bills was an overall target for the Smart Islands Partnership, not just for the project. All the projects are aiming to hit those targets and improved and more ambitious targets that have since been set. In terms of the electricity reduction in bills, the result, and there's a story behind the result, but the result is that only the houses that have, the social houses that have the solar panels benefit from any reduction in bills because part of their electricity bill is offset by the production from the solar panels on the roofs. And that's close to 20%, depending on how much electricity is used during the day when the sun is out. As was mentioned before and in the report, the ambition was to actually charge for that electricity and to earn income from the other solar sites, like the solar garden and the waste site, and offer a tariff that made electricity bills cheaper for all the residents that wanted to sign up. And we set up a model that proved that could work, and then we were hit by some very bad luck in terms of the partner we chose, backed by the Scottish Government, went bankrupt, and we've not had the resource to look to replace that partner yet. But the model was proven, and we had a good sign-up to that local tariff, as was mentioned in the report, better than most other community tariffs. But ultimately, we haven't yet been able to make good progress towards that target. I hope that answers the question.
Is there a likelihood that something will happen? That there will be another community tariff?
I'll have to defer to Nicola or Jim on that one. It's a possibility, I think.
Jim, I think, has an answer for you on that one.
Yes, it is a possibility, and more than a possibility, it can happen. We have got another agreement in place, in principle, with another energy provider to launch another energy tariff. I think the challenge is to be able to deliver the energy savings with that tariff. So we could launch a tariff tomorrow on the Isles of Scilly. But if we want to launch a tariff that has the energy savings, then we need to have significantly more renewable energy production and income to make that viable. And I think this comes back to some points that were made earlier about the original anticipated income streams to make that work.
Thank you, Jim. One more question from Councillor Dean was that he believes that the electric cars are being used by the council. Are the council paying to use these? And if so, are we paying the going rate or are we on a reduction? I think that's probably for Jim as well.
The council are not currently paying for the use of the vehicles. No, they're being used as part of the project and a part of the testing that we're doing at the moment. So, for example, the van that the operational services team is using at the moment is plugged in at the end of every day at Carn Thomas, which then forms part of testing that Hitachi are doing on that particular charger.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Legg, do you have any questions?
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Joel for what he said, because a lot of what I was interested in was covered by that. Specifically, I think the comms at the start of the project. I think there's probably some good lessons learned there about engagement with the community. The report does emphasise the technical nature of the project and how difficult it was to get that across. But I think perhaps we could do more there. I'm also interested in the technology that's gone into people's houses to enable better use of energy, and whether in the future we could be looking to spread that more widely, or whether we found that actually the technology is perhaps not necessarily appropriate for wide-scale use. I'd like to mention that working with the community venture to choose a vehicle that is suitable has been, they've been very, very accommodating. St Agnes, it wouldn't be appropriate to have an electric sports car here, or probably any electric car wouldn't necessarily be the right fit, but finding something that does fit, it has been a good process. I'm also interested in the software side of the car share scheme and how Jim's found that side of development, and if the community venture has been involved with it much, or if it's been mostly left to our other partners.
Nicola.
Thank you, Harry. I think there's a few things here I'd like to pick up on, and I think it does boil down to comms. So you ask about the home energy management system and how people found that and whether it's working well within the homes. I think if you had some people who wanted it in the first place and understood it, you'd probably get a better chance of success. And I think a lot of this was it was imposed on people and didn't quite understand it. And it's a bit like whenever I talk to registered providers a lot in housing associations about when they introduce heating systems, people just want to fiddle with it. And with the home energy management system, you've got to leave it alone and let the brain do the work for you. And that's counterintuitive to a lot of people. And I think we've come across that, is that where it's worked really well is where people have just left it well alone. And where it hasn't worked well is when people just wanted to adjust the settings. And I think that's been a challenge for us because it wasn't, though, people didn't ask for it necessarily or understand it, and that's caused a few technical problems. So I think moving forward, I think as we do energy efficiency measures, we need to make sure they're suitable for the audience and for the tenants that we've got. So I think that's a good lesson learned from us. I think Jim will answer the questions around the software for the car share. He's been very involved in development of that and making sure we've got something that's suitable. So I'll bring that in on that one. They're the main points of the questions I think that you asked. So if I hand over to Jim, he can talk to you about the software for the car share.
Thank you, Nicola. So yes, there's actually two, and I'll be as brief as I can here. There's two elements, or probably three elements to the software. There is the software that, or the systems that Hitachi are developing in the background, which will do the energy optimization, tariff optimization, and vehicle-to-grid optimization. So the community venture has a weekly call with Hitachi on the development, but is less involved in the day-to-day development of that particular piece of software. That's Hitachi's work package that they're delivering for us, but we have weekly calls to interact on that. Then there is the software of the car share scheme itself, the mobile phone application, the boxes that sit in the cars that will enable us to open those, etc. The community venture has been highly involved in the development of that, and particularly my colleague in the community venture has been leading on that particular package to make sure that we have an application and a website that works for Silly. So coming down to how address verification works properly for us, that level of detail. We've been heavily involved in that. And then finally, there is another piece which is not the car share scheme, but the general use charging, which will be a separate system which will allow people to pay for the energy that they use for their own electric vehicles when they plug into the charging network. And again, the community venture is highly involved through the installation company, Central Generation, and their subcontractor software company who are delivering that part to ensure that we get exactly what we want for Silly.
Brilliant. That's great to hear that there has been that input into the software development from a local level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Legg. Can I ask Councillor Watt? Do you have any questions?
Well, thank you, Chairman. Just basically a comment, because Councillor Legg and in particular Joel has also covered most of the points I was going to make. But just Nicola hinted about communications, and I think there's a line in the Hitachi evaluation report about communications that stood out to me, and it was little useful data from tenants, and I think they put that down to lack of communication in the beginning. And again, in Nicola's report, paragraphs 59 and paragraphs 81, key lessons learnt, because the whole point of history is that we learn from it and don't just look at it as something that happened to somebody else in a different country. Key lessons learnt, and the need to conduct community engagement and communications. And it goes on to say about the prior to funding bids, but surely also at key stages during the project as well. So it's not really a question, it's just to, because most of it's already been covered, but just to emphasise the important point about the role that communications plays in reassuring the community that the council is doing the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watt. Councillor Marcus.
Thank you. I'd like to drill down a bit on the report, if that's all right. So it's going to skim around a little bit, but if you can pick up answers as we come to it. And firstly, I'll just do a bit of an introduction. I think there's two themes to the report and the actual project as well. How the project came about and the actual delivery of the project. I think the first theme is all about governance, really, and it boils down to how the project was designed and sort of the targets that were set. Second theme is linked, and it's more about the usefulness and practicality and the application of the project on the ground. And as always, with any kind of project, and especially with innovation projects, it's kind of easy to focus on the negatives rather than celebrate those positives about how it's actually helped. I haven't got an issue with any of the projects. Totally support wholeheartedly the projects and the reduction of carbon and energy poverty on the islands. But it's also, I think, really important to understand about how the project was designed and thought about, and that context of that project in the wider political arena as well. So in terms of governance and acceptance of the project on the islands, there were and probably still are some issues around that. I think a question for John to start off with. After reading the Hitachi report and the Winning Moves reports, the main thing I got out of it was the project scale. How can Hitachi learn from that scale, from sort of the lack of scale, basically, of the project? What's the company going to do to ensure that doesn't happen again, basically, or are you happy with the results of that?
Thanks, Councillor Marcus. I'm not happy with the results because I'm a bit of a perfectionist and can see, as you can, where we didn't do things well enough and we learned lessons. But I still think overall it's left a positive legacy, and it's been positive for Hitachi. The scale was always a tricky item because of the mix of targets. To win £8 million from European funding, you have to prove that what you're doing has not been done before anywhere in Europe, and therefore you really have to push the boundaries of innovation. We had to show how home devices could be used to balance the grid in the light of increasing renewable generation, which is intermittent, and how you could connect that to signals from the national grid where there were faults or issues arising. And we had to help 200 businesses be more energy efficient, and we had to improve the EPC performance of council homes, and we had to do something that was useful for the islands and for the legacy that also tackled fuel poverty. So it's difficult. You can get scale in one area, but you can't get scale across a myriad of different targets like that when you've got one pot of money, one small team, and a lot of balls to juggle. So I had to work out how we hit those targets and how we passed the audits ultimately, because with £8 million comes a huge amount of scrutiny, and it was very difficult. In terms of what we achieved, I think in terms of the solar installations that you're left with, I don't think we could have done more there. A lot of the funding had to go on improving the structure of the houses, putting new roofs on Sally Port, putting whole new central heating systems in and new wiring and a lot of things like that we just didn't expect. We did do surveys before the project started, but those surveys were not good enough. They didn't expose the actual condition of the homes that we had to work with. So in terms of Hitachi and the 2 million we put in, we had to move a lot of that from actually doing software design and development around innovation to covering the overspend on the installs, because otherwise that would have hit the council or other partners, and that limited what we could do on the kind of software innovation side, and it kind of limited what you on the ground saw, because a lot of it wasn't visible. It was behind the scenes, if you like. On the communications point, I definitely take that point. I chose to recruit 3 people on the islands to work with the community. 2 of those people came from the community, and 1 person came from outside. I spent a year in 2016 on the islands, week on, week off, to make sure I understood the islands, and like most people, I fell in love with the islands and wanted to do the best for them. But when you've got all that technology and you've got targets to hit and time is marching on, I think we didn't spend enough time getting the public on board and explaining the technology and why it had to be a certain way. compared to to making sure we finished on time and to budget, which ultimately we did. So yes, there's different levers you have to pull, and different things that give in order to make sure we didn't spend more money than we'd been given, and that we finished on the 30th of November 2019. Some things had to be rushed, and unfortunately that caused problems.
I really appreciate your honesty there, John. Thank you very much. It's kind of, I mean, that's the thing. As councillors, we have to be representing the needs of our community and what we, as people, are hearing from the community. Not necessarily agreeing with all of them, but also representing them and holding suppliers and officers to account on those. And we have to be concerned about with the legacy of the projects like this. So, and that's not just the on-island usefulness, as you've talked about with and Nicholas talked about as well, with the HEM system, the hot water systems, etc. But there's also the political legacy and brand recognition as well. So firstly, my questions are, has it affected people of the islands in a positive manner? Has it reduced bills and complexity of energy consumption and energy billing? Has it made maintenance cheaper for the homes, owners, tenants and landlords? Has it reduced energy usage? Has the project given us more self-sufficiency in terms of energy production? Has it meant we are less reliant on carbon-intensive energy production? And sort of on the wider political scale, has the project made it easier for the council to unlock other funding and given us a seat in discussions that we would have otherwise passed us by? So I don't know, that's there's loads of questions there. Nicola, John, Jim, I don't know.
Shall I start? And then I will definitely call upon others, yeah. I think the answer to your questions is yes and no. So we've fully met some of the ambitions, and we've not met some others. Have we reduced reliance on carbon? Well, for those people who've got solar or air source heat pumps, yes, we have, haven't we? But for those that haven't, no, we haven't, because there's a wider population to deal with. So we're part of the way along a journey. This is what I keep coming back to, is these projects provide part of the solution. They were never going to solve all our problems around low carbon and energy efficiency on the island. So they're part of the solution. They've done their bit. They've started us off on the conversations, at least when it's been controversial, people have been talking about it. And it's raised awareness, I think, about the need for low carbon on the island and for looking at alternative solutions. Are we anywhere near self-sufficiency? Nowhere near, because we could be absolutely self-sufficient in renewable energy, but we just haven't got those schemes up and running yet. I mean, we haven't got any wave, we haven't got any wind, we didn't get the AD gasification plant off the ground. So all these things that were the original concept to get us just to 40%, we didn't get there. But our ambition now is 100%. So what does that mean for the islands moving forward? So learning from what we've done so far, and particularly around scale, what is it that we need to do moving forward? And I think that working with the community around what that climate change strategy is going to be and the action plan that goes with that is a massive next step, because actually the discussions we've had with the sector, the renewable energy sector, is it's probably easier to get to 100% than 40% because you need to go at scale. Now, we don't know whether we can find a solution through the marine environment or through using wind power yet, and that work still has to be concluded and form part of those discussions moving forward. So I think, to me, it's a partial success story, and there's a lot of lessons learned to take forward. But the issue we've got to grapple with, climate change, zero carbon council, zero carbon islands, is a much bigger one and a much bigger challenge than what we've done so far. So the concern I've got probably moving forward is this took a lot of money, European external funding, to get us to where we are now. How we're going to grapple with it moving forward, given that there won't be that European funding to draw down upon. So to me, I think the ambition's still there. I think people understand low carbon and climate change much more. But how do we translate it into something that's tangible? You saw the Bees project. I've had hardly any murmurings around the Bees project. Business energy efficiency, people understood it. It was tangible. People could see it. and it was accessible. How do we turn all those ambitions moving forward into projects that people can understand and get buy into? And I think that, to me, that's the thing that challenges me moving forward.
I'd like to make 2 comments. Firstly, it's not just the homes that have the solar panels on. There's also the other solar installations at the solar garden, the airport fire station, the airport terminal, the Morwell fire station, the waste site, and the desalination plant. They all contribute to the islands using less carbon-intensive energy. There's 1,300 solar panels overall that are all, when they're producing, are saving the islands importing energy over the cable. So that does help overall. You're reducing your carbon. And everyone who sees those understands that the islands are taking steps towards mitigating climate change. And the point on recognition outside, it has been a hugely beneficial case study for the islands and for Hitachi and for Cornwall and for the UK government. The project appeared in Theresa May's industrial strategy as one of 12 case studies, which was pretty exceptional. For a project on the islands, and that still today is coming up in conversations and has been discussed in terms of the upcoming United Nations COP26 conference as being a feature there. So I think it has created actually more of a positive experience off the islands than perhaps on the islands, but it's still something that you can be proud of.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I think that's really important for the community to understand is the political legacy of the project and how it's put Scilly on the map for the COP26 conference. It's going to be quite huge, quite again punching above our weight in terms of funding and projects. Sorry to go on. There's just some specific questions on the actual report as well. Paragraph 30 talks about the home energy management systems. I understand it's a small scale, but how well are those systems being used now? Are those systems still being used? Have they been overridden at all again, or what's the usage on those?
So I'll kick off and then pass to John. So most of them are operational. We've had 1 or 2 issues where existing residents have decided that it's not for them, and we've done a manual switch on at least a couple, I think. But John will have the outputs from the rest. I think it was a lot about behavioural change, and that was quite a big challenge for some people. So it was that discussion earlier about wanting to fiddle and control everything yourself and trusting a system that does it for you. But John has some of the outputs from that.
Yeah, it is a mixed bag. It doesn't work for everybody. For the homes that have the air source heat pumps, I think it works very well in terms of, as Nicola says, if you set a temperature and leave the system to do it, it will heat your home to that temperature at the lowest cost using solar energy wherever it can, or low-cost energy if you're on Economy 7. In terms of the controls around the hot water tanks, again, it tries to heat hot water for when you need it using free solar power where it can. But again, if you want, if you have a lot of changing requirements and you want to override it, it doesn't work so well. So it was an innovative solution, and as with most innovative things, it doesn't work for everyone, but there's definitely lessons learned. Where you roll out, if you put solar on other homes, then I would definitely consider it, and if you're putting heat pumps in other homes, I would also consider it. But in terms of other homes where just to heat the water more intelligently based on lower energy costs, you can probably do a better job yourself, knowing that you're going to need an unusual bath, for a company that don't normally have the system. The system can't account for that. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. So I think it's a question from Nicola. Paragraph 32 about the ongoing cost of maintaining and replacing the kit, and how that's going to be funded. Are we going to break even on that? Is that a burden? Is there a net cost on that?
The ongoing costs relate to really just the electrical checks, for particularly the solar. and those are just done as part of our normal electrical checks with the tenants as part of the maintenance repair programme. So it's part of an existing cost. So I think it will be hidden within that. It won't make any significant difference to the overall costs of repair and maintenance of our properties moving forward. I suppose the big challenge will come in 25 years' time when the solar panels need replacing, and it's at that point then we'll have a capital cost to replace them. But the ongoing repair and maintenance, these are tried and tested systems these days. That's not innovation, if you like, because those solar panels in particular are well used and well practiced elsewhere, and their maintenance and warranties give us a 25-year lifespan. So I'm not worried about the day-to-day management operation. It's that in 20 years' time we'll be looking at what replacements we'll need for those systems. So the current system won't change the rental costs significantly. The cost of maintenance repair will remain pretty much the same.
Okay. I mean, the last... So a question for Jim. Just with the user acceptance testing, just with my sort of lead member for adults hats on, just making sure that the older, shall we say, less tech-savvy members of the community, that there's going to be support for them when they use the app. I mean, it's a great market, great sector of the community that will use the electric vehicles, hopefully. Just want to flag that up and make sure that that's been thought about. And paragraph 74 and 75 in the report talks about income streams. And I guess this is going to be part of the recommendation that Councillor Williams talked about in terms of business plan for the community venture. Paragraph 74 says of the estimated annual income streams, only the solar PV and part of the rooftop solar generation will create ongoing income for the community venture. Is this being realised now? Is this and when will that come on stream? And paragraph 75 talks about power purchase agreements and behind-the-meter billing. Do you want to explain that a little bit for people who might not know what that means?
Certainly. So in terms of user acceptance testing, I think it was more around sort of training and support for the older members of the community. I think that it's not only the older members of the community that we're going to provide training and support for, it's everyone who joins the scheme will be there to talk them through the use of the app. So we've got time within the project and the resource that we've got within the project to make sure that all users have an induction into how the technology is used. I don't think it's just the app, though. It's the app. There's a website, so the website will make it easier for people to book if they don't want to use a fiddly mobile phone app. So there's a website that goes with that as well. But it's also using the cars, and the vehicles and people. We've done for every person who is using the vehicle at the moment. We have done a short induction on using it to make sure people are comfortable with that. They are just automatic vehicles, but often people haven't used an automatic vehicle. The Nissan Leaf vehicles have got a foot handbrake rather than a hand handbrake, so it's just little things that people getting used to how they use. So we will definitely do that. I think your next question was in terms of an income stream from the PV. The answer is no, that is not being realised yet, but that is very imminent to being realised. And we've got our first PPA offer, which I'll come on to explain, in the bag at the moment. So that should be very imminent that gets realised. Explaining then what a PPA and behind-the-meter billing is. A PPA is a power purchase agreement. This is an agreement that an owner of renewable energy assets can have with an energy company to sell any units of energy that are exported to the grid and earn an income from that. So instead of having the old feed-in tariff, which was the way these were supported, this is more of a commercial arrangement that you have with an energy company. The units of energy that are exported to the grid are metered via an export meter, and you get paid for every unit that gets exported by the energy company. Typically, rates are somewhere between 5 and 6p. I think the offer that we've got in is about 5.2 pence per kilowatt hour. So that's the commercial arrangement you have externally. Behind the meter billing is any billing that you do. So behind the meter, we're talking about the meter that you would have in your house. In front of the meter is typically on the grid side. Behind the meter is the bit that's within the building. And so behind the meter billing is anything that you do on a non-commercial, non-regulated side of the meter to charge for any solar usage that is used by the building behind the meter. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Thank you very much. And I think that is all from me. I think I've talked for far too long. Thank you all for your answers.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. I'd like to ask our Vice Chairman of Council, Councillor Grottick, to ask any questions she wishes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to state at the outset that I don't sit on this committee, but I do sit on the Local Enterprise Partnership, which I've done since the spring of 2017. And I'd just like to declare that I've always removed myself from all discussions or votes around any of these projects. I think it's very important that we acknowledge the progress and the hard work and progress of aspects of the projects and the hard work of individuals who contributed to that. And I'm glad that colleagues have made that point. However, I think it is timely at this point to review the project, discuss further work and take a lessons learned approach, which is again mentioned in the accompanying report. I think it's fair to point out, just for anyone who might be listening to the meeting, that our officer, Nicholas Stinson, was actually not working for the council at the outset of the project. And I think it's fair that we point that out. As mentioned, the council did support the vision of the original project, but the majority of members did not have any contribution after that to look at the original targets or indeed the progress of the memorandum of the understanding that followed. And possibly it might have been helpful if there had been more democratic input at that point. I think it's worth mentioning. For me, it's the governance, communication, engagement and monitoring aspects of the project that do merit work to ensure improvements for the future. As Steve Watt made the valuable comment, we have to learn not only what goes well, but obviously also where we can improve in the future. So if I may, Chair, I just have several more focused questions for this morning after those general comments. And to start with, I'd like to ask a question about targets, because the original memorandum of understanding, as several colleagues had pointed, had clear targets. And I would like to ask two questions around the targets in the original memorandum of understanding. Firstly, I would ask if there were composite baseline figures in place to serve as a benchmark for measuring progress around green energy. I realise we now have a very laudable aspiration for 100% of green energy, which would obviously be very beneficial. But I'd like to know if there are clear benchmark figures so that we know where we were actually starting from. And secondly, because it's a Hitachi question as well, I would like to ask a question around the current status of educational support to the school, which was outlined in the original Memorandum of Understanding around support for STEM subjects, cultural and language development, and possible internships, all of which sounded to me extremely exciting at the outset. And yet I must admit right now, I don't actually know where we are with that, and I'd like an update on it, please. And thirdly, if I could ask, what is the current status of the Internet of Things, which is mentioned as being functioning within the report? Can Hitachi confirm that it's actually an integral part of the project at the moment as we discuss this? And should the closing report from Hitachi, which is a public report, but as far as I know may not have been seen by all members, be subject to further discussion, possibly at full council or in another forum outside of council, and perhaps the chair of scrutiny might consider whether or not that might be part of any ongoing discussion. Thank you.
You're muted, Apple.
Sorry. Who would you like to answer your questions? Would that be John Wybrow?
Whoever, I mean, I'm very grateful that we have so many colleagues to answer our questions this morning. I think we're having a really good debate, and I appreciate everybody's contribution. But I would imagine that it would be John Wybrow for the educational aspects of the Memorandum of Understanding, possibly John Wybrow with the benchmark figures, and the Internet of Things as well, possibly. I'm sorry, John, it does appear to be mostly yours.
I'll do my best. I'm only Nicola's help. I wasn't actually part of the original MOU either, so I can only go on what I inherited. I believe the benchmark was part of an Island Futures report, and I think it was set at the year 2000, but I would have to go back and check in terms of the benchmark. What we tried to do with the projects was show an absolute reduction in terms of how much energy we're using today, or how much solar power is in existence, and how can we increase that. Yeah, I think the targets. Well, the targets or objectives or aims weren't, designed to be an accurate calculation against a specific number. They were aimed to direct the right type of projects to be sought. In terms of the educational support, so that was an objective for the Smart Energy Islands project during the project as it went on. And on average, there was an activity or a visit once per term to the school, either by one of the three Hitachi project members on the island or by myself. I attended the careers fair, and I did a talk to the upper school in terms of my career, for what it's worth, and ideas of things that the students could consider in the choice of A-levels and next steps, or apprenticeships, or going out into the world. We've also had a number of contacts from students asking for data or help with projects that we always respond to wherever we can. But there's not an ongoing program of internships. So a lot of the direct activity of the school stopped at the end of 2019 when the Smart Energy Islands project stopped. But perhaps that's something that we could look at going forward, as you're right, it's still part of the overall MOU, which Hitachi is still part of. In terms of the Internet of Things system, its current status is still functioning and in existence. It's part of the GoEV project, as Jim mentioned. So the purpose of the system was to control various household appliances, from heating systems, hot water, home batteries that were installed, the heat pumps and electric vehicles, to balance renewables that were either on or off, and try and balance the system such that more renewable energy was available and used on the islands. And that's still able to be used. The extension we're doing on GoEV is to add the cars and the fleet of 10 electric vehicles that Jim is implementing into that system, to prove that as well as heating and home technology, you can also add a public electric fleet to that energy balancing system. So it is very much focused on innovation and systems and models that will be useful for the future, and very relevant to the UK as a whole, with its net zero target for 2050. And yes, it's still functioning. I hope that answers the questions. Any follow-on questions relating to those?
Councillor Bucket?
No, I think you've covered the ground that was yours in enough depth. Thank you very much. And my last question then about the closing report is possibly just something for members of the Scrutiny Committee to discuss, or perhaps not to discuss, but to think about whether in the future it would be valuable to have another closer look at the closing report from Hitachi, but I don't expect it to be answered this morning. Thank you.
I think that you've covered a lot of the questions through all the member questions. There is a lot of technical stuff. For Councillor Legg, I'm happy to go into details around the software and the technologies. That's my favourite area. Coming back to a point that Councillor Marcus made about the targets that are set for a project at the start, I think that's a really important point. I, as I mentioned, kind of inherited the project once the application form had been done and the money was won, and at the time, obviously, to be offered £8.6 million from Europe to do a project on the Scillies, was a fantastic win. But it did come with strings attached, and it's really difficult to get that balance of seeking money to do projects that you'd otherwise not be able to do, but understanding how you balance the requirements of the funding with the requirements of the islands. So I think that point about looking at how we go after funding that enables us to do projects like these is balanced and is governed and is set such that everyone understands the compromises that need to be made, but the benefits that funding will bring.
Thank you, John. I'd just like to ask Councillor Sims, have you any comments to make, Councillor Sims? We haven't heard you talk at all.
Yes, sadly quite a lot.
Okay.
First of all, the comms on the whole thing, I wasn't involved from the word go. I thought I was, but I recall there was another councillor who was there when the word go. I came in about 12 months after it started. And the comms were always an issue. I mean, I've had numerous conversations with people about Smart Islands, I mean, more in the past than now. And they were quite happy nodding away for the first minute, and then their eyes would glaze over because it's a very, very complicated thing to explain. And they sort of lost interest in the end. They just wanted to know whether we were going to get the reduction and stuff like that. And I did do it must have been 3-4 years ago, a thing in Sunny Now and Then, which worked quite well. It was quite comprehensive about how it was going to work, and that and people seemed to understand that for a while, but then that went away. And I think comms with a very, very complicated program like this were an issue, and there were endless conversations about how to do the comms effectively. But because I think largely the comms failed to an extent because it was such a complicated project, and I think that's something to be looked at. However, I don't really know how you can get around that with any complicated project. I mean, and one thing that always fascinated me, the electric vehicles were, some aspects of the electric vehicles we've got here were, if you like, the icing on the cake, a lovely thing for the locals, but it seemed to go horribly wrong, and people, they became a pariah. Now, hopefully that's moved on a little bit now. That was quite alarming. I can remember certainly one of our councillors moaning like hell about the fact we were getting electric cars at meetings. This is the previous council. Another point is that clearly we have a lot of local nibbles with this, which have come out today, but I think that we do need to bear in mind externally this has been looked at very favourably, and as far as I know, all the funders are very happy with the outcomes from their perspective, so that's useful. And another thing which I think is very important, if you look at the table, I think it's Power 73, the table of the perspective, I'll go back to it in a minute. Yeah, paragraph 73, the table there. Now, optimism bias I'm coming to now. I did think this at the time, I did mention it at the time, if some of these things don't come off, what's going to happen? But there was such a lot of enthusiasm for the first project then, and it didn't really cut across. But if you look at that, the only income generation that we have in that table are the top two. The rest of them disappeared. So in rather than 733k, we've got respectively 88, which is a hell of a difference, about 10%. So optimism bias is something you've got to look at. We need to look at with projects of this nature in the future. I think that's really important. Another thing which has not helped the project is the council changed substantially. This council is a substantially different council to the previous council. The last council was a much more cosmopolitan, outward-looking council than we have now. We're a little bit more parochial now, which is not necessarily a bad thing. You know, it's more about getting the bins empty and everything straight. But so, and certainly when Teo left, we lost a lot of the council drive to Smart Islands. It just sort of, I would hesitate to say it got put on the back burner, but it got nearer the back burner than certainly what it was before. Coming back to what John said earlier on, the bid was by its very nature ambitious because it was an innovation bid, and as John said, there are inherent risks within the bid, which is why some of it has not perhaps played out as we would have liked to have done. But I think that expectation should have been built in initially, i.e. coming back to optimism bias, it wasn't. And just to add a little bit to what John said about Internet of Things, the Internet of Things is all pervasive now. It's everywhere. You can get your fridge, and it will tell you need to get some more Venezuelan Biber cheese because you're running out, because you put the barcode in when you put it in the fridge. And if you don't open the fridge for 3 days, it will contact the police and say you're probably dead. There's an awful lot of Internet of Things is everywhere. I mean, it's like Hitachi, I think, have got trains, and every nut and bolt virtually is connected to something on there. So you're getting 5 or 6 terabytes of information from this train all the time. And there's a vast amount of data out there. And just as a recommendation for any of you that have got younger kids, and I know some of us here have, if you want an assured, safe career, which is going to make you a lot of money, go into data engineering, because there's going to be so much demand for data engineers in the future. And the other thing, the final point I would like to make on this is a more positive point. There's been a massive net gain for the islands out of this whole project. We're ahead of the game in terms of charging points, which Jonathan said earlier on. Every council is going to have. We have a substantial amount of PV and a lot more generation than we would have had otherwise. So, you know, overall it's working out pretty well. And I would also give a big cheer to Jim, because given the situation with the income streams, he's done a considerable job to keep the whole thing going and keep the whole thing moving. And I think something we should possibly address at some point is what the likely future for the CIC is, because I think that has been an issue amongst councillors, and I'm not altogether sure, because obviously as funding streams dry up, its future becomes uncertain. But essentially, I'll shut up now, okay?
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thanks everyone for a really good discussion. I just want to make a few observations just to kind of round off a few points. I think one of the issues for Smart Islands programme as a whole has always been the lack of project management and communications for the whole programme. There were for the individual projects, and I think that was a bit of a lack of, I'm not saying it's an oversight, because it's difficult to get funding for the whole thing, but if you try and do it better in the future, I think that's what you would try and do. As Nicola pointed out, the major renewable energy generation, the lack of that is still a problem, and it is an issue for the islands that we need to grapple with. There's been a lot of good things that come out of Smart Islands, but one of the things missing has been that major renewable energy generation. I think there's a bit of confusion over what Smart Islands actually meant. So again, kind of going back to Steve's point on communications and the understanding and engagement with people, that was perhaps something that could have been done better. And also picking up on, various people have picked up on the kind of the paragraph 73, the table there. I mean, to be quite frank, it's a bit of an embarrassment to read, actually, because we're nowhere near that, and I think that outlines a few things that we need to learn from. But I think my overall point would be really picking up on paragraph 80. We have declared a climate emergency. We've got a zero carbon agenda for the council, which is fantastic, and I'm absolutely 100% behind that, as you know. I'd also very much like to see that across Scilly as well. I just say, don't underestimate what that means. It's really important. I fully support it, but it's a very, very big ambition, and it needs us to work really hard to draw funding and to engage everyone in that. It's a massive challenge. It's a challenge I hope we can rise to. But, yeah, don't think we can just pull this off easily. It's going to be a big, big work stream. But I hope it's something we really fully engage with because it's absolutely fundamental for all of us. Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Has anybody else got any... Councillor Watt.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to say, I think one of the most significant paragraphs in the Hitachi evaluation report is the one near the end, which is headed "Communicate the Success." And I think that is a really key part of this whole project. That you can turn your back and think, oh well, that's that. Let's look at the next project. Let's communicate it properly. So what we've done right, and what the whole project's done to the islands, I think is important to be communicated. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Just a quick question about ongoing repairs and maintenance. I think I'm right in saying that there was a small amount of funding set aside within the pot for upskilling locals to be able to maintain the vehicles and things like that. Is that something which is developing?
Absolutely. I'm just about to go to tender for a training provider to come over to the Isles of Scilly to deliver a training programme of 3, maybe 4 separate courses related to various different aspects of knowledge around electric vehicles, but also training on the maintenance of electric vehicles. And also we hope to do a bolt-on course for emergency services and understanding how to treat incidents with electric vehicles as well. So again, delayed by COVID, we haven't been able to put that out to tender because we wouldn't have been able to get a training provider over here to deliver that training. But we hope that as the restrictions are lifted, we'll be able to deliver that training course over the summer. It will be something that will be open to both council members of staff, but also the wider community to get that training if they require it, if they want it.
And does that stretch us, obviously different training, but do we have the skills on the islands to deal with the home installations and the kit on the roof of properties as well?
So the training I was talking about was specifically training that's set aside in the GoEV budget for the electric vehicles. So I haven't got training within my budget to spend to be put to other training courses. But I do believe there are a range of skills on island to be able to maintain certainly the solar PV systems.
Yes, the electricians that we generally use on the island have got the tickets to do those works.
Is that all, Councillor Williams? I'm sorry, I'm frozen.
It is, yeah. I'll jump up again.
That's right, thank you. Councillor Sims.
Yeah, I just referring back to comms again. It really wasn't for the want of trying. The issue was the level of complexity. There was an enormous amount of work went into trying to communicate this properly. Lots and lots of presentations down at the PET. But people employed to do it as well. But it was a very difficult problem. And just in terms of repair and maintenance, just to contextualise it. Now, there's nobody around who can contradict me, so I'm going to say 1928. In 1928, the council probably decided to electrify its social housing. And it's exactly the same thing. I mean, there may be somebody on the council at that stage said, well, wait, who's going to be paid for the repair and maintenance on it? This is something you absolutely have no choice about. You've got to move forward, and it has to be done. And so, that's basically that point there. There's no choice. This has got to be done, particularly if we're going to hit our climate change targets. Because if we don't do it, we're flat not going to manage it.
Thank you, Councillor Sims. Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, a couple of things. I don't think we don't need to look back too much. I think we need to be aware of what happened and what went wrong and what we can do better. But looking back endlessly doesn't enable us to go forward. So, in terms of that, I mean, would you do it again? Nicola, would you do it again? John, would you go for this kind of project again? Bit of a blunt question, but...
I think the answer from me would be yes. Would we do it differently? Probably yes. But a yes and a yes.
Yes, same for me, definitely.
Cool, thank you.
And an absolute yes from me.
And John too, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Well, I think Councillor Sims, you still got your hand up.
Yes, I've put it up again. I know I'm not supposed to be asking questions, but I just have a question for John. I mean, what has been the feedback from the funders and everything? I understand it's all gone quite well. I just think it's probably worth making that point, just to reiterate that externally, it's been pretty positive. At least my understanding is.
Yes, I mean, the funders tend to look at a quite narrow set of statistics and not so broad. But yes, the feedback has been positive from them. From around the funders, from the government department and the related government department, it's been extremely positive. That they've been amazed at what we've been able to achieve over such a range of different targets in such a special and protected place. And mixing a huge Japanese corporate with a unique community and a bunch of strange technology and helping businesses be more energy efficient. It's got an odd range. So yes, it has been positive feedback from outside.
Thank you, John. Councillor Brothick.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I'd just like to take slight issue with one of Councillor Sims' comments where he says that the council's lost impetus around Smart Islands. I think it's more, I'd like to rephrase it. We've certainly not lost impetus in commitment, but we're working to try and refocus and find a balance. And I think John Mybrow made a very interesting point when he said when he arrived to put the PV panels on the roof, he hadn't realised the state of the social housing that he'd be working with. And I just have to say I am incredibly proud of the work that Nicola, her officers and everyone has done to improve our social housing. And I would hope that we could also build more of it. And together with that, we then look at the green energy arrangements for improvements at the same time. But it's just a question of finding the balance.
Thank you.
So well done, everyone, for the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, I think everybody's said what I was going to say at the end, that there are a lot of positives that have come out of this. And I think particularly the Bees project has been, it got off the ground in the end, and I think that's coming to a close now. There's just one question I would like to ask anybody. Has anybody taken a register in 2015 of how many cars there were on the island that were electric? And has anybody done the equivalent figures in 2020? It would just be an interesting thing to see how many people have switched. I just wondered if somebody could do that. Nicola?
I think we did have some information because we were trying to get some electric vehicle information at the start of Smart Energy Islands. And from memory, I think there was just one, which was when I was here. So in 2017, there was just one electric vehicle, and that was a slightly old technology. We can certainly look at what we've got now, which is our own schemes, and you see others are starting to take up the mantle. We've used both voucher scheme and business energy efficiency to help businesses secure funding for electric vehicles as well. So certainly something we can do a bit of an audit on. And Keith's on the call here. It's something probably Keith will be able to pick up on for us.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think, I think the future of the CIC is very much on everybody's minds at the moment, and we shall look forward to having a detailed business case on that. Now, I'd like to ask Councillor Williams, have you got the up-to-date recommendations that we need to put forward? We would need
I do.
because I think yours vary a little bit from mine. So I'm going to let you put those forward, please.
In terms of chronology, Avril, you and I spoke at about 9:10, and I thought we got somewhere. And then literally, as I was logging on, I got an email from Paul, our Chief Executive, with further amendments from Stephen, which is the version I'm going to read out. And I don't know if Paul has sent me anything subsequently, but if I reread what came through at about 9:29 and 59 seconds, I've got: the Council and all members are fully engaged and informed in the formulation and commissioning of any future schemes of the scale of the Smart Islands project. Formal approval for such schemes is reserved to Council in order that they can be fully understanding of the risks and assumptions made, especially in projects of an innovative and transformation nature. The Chief Executive establish a corporate approach to project management and progress reporting to members and our community to further improve the Council's performance management arrangements. And a detailed business case is brought back to full Council by October 2021 on the GoEV project, which will include consideration of the interlink viability and purpose of the CIC, which will also clarify the future liability of the Council in relation to any associated assets.
Right, thank you very much. Now we will need a proposer for that, please.
Yeah, I'll propose it.
I'll second. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, and all those in favour? Anybody against? So that's carried. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you very much, John, for coming to speak to us today. It's been very much appreciated. Thank you to Nicola and to Jim as well. And also, I know we haven't had any conversations with Keith, but I think you're still there as well. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you. Bye. And thank you, Fran, for your questions as well. Thank you. Cool. Right. Now go on to agenda item 5, which is the collaboration agreements with Cornwall Council. I'd like to ask Paul if he could present his paper, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. This was, if you remember, a promised update report following the meeting of Scrutiny on the 13th of October, where we also had colleagues on the call from Cornwall Council in terms of the collaboration agreement with Cornwall Council, which, just to remind members, is in effect a number of service offers that they provide to us, in effect, as a contractor. So this is sort of client-contractor type arrangement with a trusted friend on the mainland. And you had a debate all about that collaboration agreement on the 13th of October and made a number of recommendations. And so this is an update, Chairman, on progress against those recommendations. The first was that you asked for a draft overarching principles document to be produced, which would sit above the agreement, which would in effect set out the ethos of what this is all about and how it should operate. And that overarching statement is at Appendix A of the report today. It's a draft. I know it's got the Chairman of the Council's name on it and myself, but it has been drafted only by myself, Chairman, in consultation with Cornwall Council colleagues. And it's before you today as a draft for then onward submission to full Council for approval, should you subject to any amendments. So that sort of tries to set the scene of what I've tried to articulate this agreement is about. The second was that the collaboration board that previously sat, which was chaired by Chairman of Council with the Deputy Leader of Cornwall Council on it, we discussed, if you recall, and bearing in mind that this is now, in effect, a service delivery contract between the two council, I was asked to, in effect, revise the terms of reference of that board and move it towards, in effect, a performance management board, which has happened. It's had its first meeting. It's been agreed that it's chaired by myself, and the terms of reference of that board are appended to the report as well at Appendix B. The third was that how would we report progress against those measures? What we will be doing is the performance measures for each of the bits listed in the report. There will be specific PIs which are going to be agreed before the end of this month, so within the 6 months of the 13th, Chairman, and they will then be form part of the integrated performance report, which will come to full council every 6 months. So every 6 months, members, you will have a detailed report on the operation of all those various bits that make up the collaboration agreement. And also I gave an undertaking to you that if there are any amendments to the services, either adding to them or taking away from them, that those would be brought to the attention of full council. And in the report, we allude to one such amendment, which we hope will be able to come to March full council, which is around the prevent agenda. The prevent agenda, members, is a terrorism issue and a radicalisation issue, and is overseen by the Home Office. And there's a very detailed self-assessment which needs to be completed, which in my view is best done in partnership with Cornwall Council, particularly with Steve Rowell, who leads on that from the Community Safety Partnership side, because in order to lead on this piece of work, you have to have security clearance to the very highest level, and we have nobody with that level of security clearance. He does. I think he's pretty much the only one in Cornwall Council who does as well. And in liaison with the Chief Executive of Cornwall Council, I've put in a formal request that they consider giving us access to Steve in order to be our advisor for the islands, and I've asked Aisling Khan to take the lead as link officer to Steve Rowell. So a report on that proposal will be coming to full council in March. It's not agreed at the moment, but that's just to give you reassurance, members, that I am following what I said on the 13th of October. The last thing was in terms of the interface, political interface between the members without the collaboration agreement being in place. What we are proposing, and it's been agreed with the leader of Cornwall Council and the chairman of Council for the Isles of Scilly, is there will be in effect a political summit between all of yourselves and a number of members from Cornwall Council to be agreed by the leader of Cornwall Council. I think he's thinking about the majority, if not all, of the cabinet and maybe some of the group leaders for the council. And there would be a summit between you both once every 6 months to discuss areas of joint work or strategic issues of how you wish to lobby government on behalf of Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, bearing in mind our close relationship through things like the LEP, the LNP, Police and Crime Commissioner, etc. So I hope, Chairman, that gives you confidence that we've covered all the recommendations of scrutiny, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, Abel, I can't find where to put my hand up.
Okay.
Well, I haven't got any questions as such, really. I would quite happily propose both recommendations, and I do think it's worth, every time this comes up, I do think it's worth reiterating the point that Cornwall have got absolutely no intention or desire, and I think they'd be absolutely resistant to actually taking over the Council of the Isles of Scilly. And it also works both ways. If anybody's listening over there, we don't wish to take over Cornwall Council.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
I think you froze, Chairman.
Williams.
I think that was you, John.
Not me.
Yes,
again, no specific questions, but I welcome the comments in the report around mutual secondment. I think that sounds really interesting, really useful, particularly beneficial for some of our staff to work across a larger scale. And I wonder if some point in the future it could be a mutual secondment for members also to perhaps spend a little bit more time working across the different sides of the city.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Just an observation as I often make on this. I think it's just worth making the point that the collaboration agreement does take some well-paid jobs away from the islands. But I'm not saying that some of these positions could easily be filled locally, but we do need to reassess it in the future. I think it's really important. Whether there are any opportunities for local people to potentially take on some of these jobs and money to come back into the local economy.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, that's a really good point by Councillor Smith. And just to clarify, Paul, the first report on performance indicators will be September-ish, something like that. Is that right?
I think it'll be in line with our quarterly performance reporting, so it could be earlier than that, Dan.
Okay.
It may well be in the summer, but then it would be on a 6-monthly rolling cycle, so it would be, there'd be an end-of-year report, which would normally be June, wouldn't it, for the outturn of performance, and then, as you say, 6 months on from June, I expect would be the cycle.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Could I just ask Paul why the environmental health is in there?
We have a call-off contract arrangement with Environmental Health, Chairman. For example, we've used some of their expertise during the COVID period where Mark Luxton and Stuart Benson have been particularly helpful in giving some advice to Mike. But it's not about them running our service for us at all. In fact, in terms of the point that Jonathan Smith has just made quite rightly, as you'll see, we're out to advert at the moment for trying to get an environmental health apprentice on the islands. And absolutely, I'm very keen to spend as much time. I have talked to the headmaster at the school about how we can encourage young people to see the council as a career opportunity for them. So this is not, and I think, I'll repeat it, I've talked to members informally about it, but for the record, wherever it is possible, our first choice will always be to employ people for the council on islands wherever possible. The second is if they can't live on the islands, then they commute to the islands. And the last is if we can't fill positions, then we ask Cornwall Council to assist us. That's always the last of the priorities, not the first, Councillor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Legg?
Yeah, I agree with Councillors Marcus Smith and what the Chief Executive has just said. I was just thinking about the effect the pandemic has had on people's outlook on their working lives and how some people are now seeking a different lifestyle to before. Perhaps there are people now who would consider a life on Scilly, whereas before they wouldn't. And we might see that change going ahead with employment, but we'll have to wait and see.
Thank you very much.
If I may, Chairman, as I never miss an opportunity from what Councillor Legg said, and as we're being webcast at the moment, we currently are advertising our head of assets, which is to look after our corporate estate. So if anybody's listening to this and wants to come and work in the best place in the world, please apply.
Thank you very much. Thank you. There was just one other question. The fostering and adoption and the youth offending services, business support services, peer support and challenge, they're all in the pipeline, are they? Or what is going on with that?
No, there are service level agreements in place. They've got NA at the moment because they're due to be revised, Chairman, but that's an ongoing arrangement that's always been in place. It just means that the SLAs, the service level agreements, the specifics of what they actually are achieving need to be tightened up, and that's currently in train at the moment.
Right, thanks very much. Right. Could we have a proposer for the recommendations? That members welcome the progress made in respect to the committee's recommendations of the 13th of October 2020 and endorse the collaboration position statement set out in Appendix A and the operations board terms of reference set out in Appendix B. Could I have a proposer, please?
I've already proposed them, Admiral.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yes, you did. Thank you.
Can I just make one more small point? I think that COVID has actually illustrated in a way how useful this is because of Shared Director of Public Health. We could have quite easily been much more marginalised than we have been, and we absolutely haven't been marginalised on this because we have a Director of Public Health who's also working for Cornwall, who's got a complete awareness of the situation on the islands. And obviously, Cornwall are going to have a lot more heft when they're talking to government than perhaps we have. So I think, that's been a very, very positive development on this.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Smith, thank you very much. Is there anybody against? That's carried then. Thank you very much. Right, we come to agenda item number 6, audit and governance. Welcome, Neil. and welcome, Jason.
Hello. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. I don't know who's going to present this. Is it Neil or is it you, Jason?
So what I'll do, Chair, is I'll just give a brief overview, if I may, and then we'll hand over to Neil for some more detailed information, if that's okay.
That is fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for inviting us to this meeting. We are presenting to you some information on the work that we've done so far to date on the 2020-21 plan. Also, we're presenting for approval the 21-22 internal audit plan, and also we're asking members to note the internal audit charter and the internal audit strategy. So what I'm going to do is just very briefly run through those now, very, very quickly, just to give you an overview. Then I'm going to hand over to Neil to go into a little bit more detail, particularly on where we are with the current work and also the proposed plan for next year. So hopefully much of this will actually echo the update that we gave at the member briefing on the 24th of February. So I'm hoping that the majority of this will be familiar to you. So in terms of where we are today on the current year's plan, Neil will give you some indicative findings prior to our final report coming out to management, hopefully by the end of this month. And obviously it will come to this committee in June at the next committee meeting. The caveat with what we're going to tell you now is that the work isn't fully complete, and therefore what we tell you now in terms of our opinion could be subject to minor change. But the good news is that we don't have any significant issues based on the work we've done to date. So overall, we hope that in June we will be coming along to you with a positive message for the work that we've concluded for this year. So that's in terms of the work for 2020-21. Now, the proposed plan for the coming year is made up of 5 key areas, plus also the proposal to follow up on previously agreed management actions that have flowed from internal audit reports this year. The key message with this plan is that it will always remain flexible. A plan is only a plan, and we will adapt it to suit the needs of the council. But obviously that will be with prior engagement and approval with both management and this committee. At the June committee, we will also hope to be bringing you our head of internal audit opinion, and we will work with staff to ensure that this works in harmony with the council's annual governance statement. And we will also provide management and the committee with assurance on Cornwall Council systems that are used by the Isles of Scilly that have been audited by us in the previous period. Then we'll move on to the internal audit charter. So essentially, this basically sets out. We have to work under a set of standards, and they're called the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards. And this is basically a charter that we have to implement and maintain, and essentially it sets out our purpose, authority and responsibility, and it basically, in a nutshell, it sets out the boundaries within which we must work. The strategy, that provides more detail in terms of how we're going to deliver the service to you. So really the charter is the what and the strategy is the how. These are an adaptation of the Cornwall Council documents, the Cornwall Council Internal Audit Charter, Internal Audit Strategy, both of which have been approved and adopted through the Audit Committee at Cornwall Council. So hopefully that will give you a little bit of assurance that those 2 documents have been reviewed and been scrutinised. They've just been adapted by yourselves. And to be honest with you, if you look across most organisations in the public sector, most charters and strategies will read quite similarly. So, Chair, at this point, if I could hand over to Neil, but in the meantime, I'm naturally more than happy to take any questions with what I've said so far.
Has anybody got any questions for Jason before we go to Neil? No? Right then, Neil. Over to you.
Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. It's good to be back. Just the summary of summarise what
we've been doing so far. The report you received was based upon the work we've done to the 1st of March, so it's as current as we could make it. Jason has already alluded to the fact that the work so far has been positive, and I think that's true. There are a few areas where we've still got work to do, but they are in progress. In fact, I was just about to do something about one of them, and it was called so it's hot off the press. But progress has been good, and I want to make this point. I've made this point before, but I want to make the point to you that your officers have been extremely supportive and cooperative when it comes to the completion of our work. Without them, auditing is very hard. So I'd just like you to note that there is a very positive engagement with us across the council to date. So I think that's worthy of note. The work progress to date is driven by the plan that was agreed with you on the 19th of November 2020, which was a variation of the original plan, original 3-year plan that had been agreed with you in July of 2019. So the areas under review, I'll just take them through as we go. Asset management was part of this plan, but we've agreed with officers to defer the work until 21-22 because, as the Chief Executive has just mentioned, they are recruiting an asset manager, and it was felt more beneficial to work with that person once appointed to review and assess the scope and the nature of what they need to do. So there will be a separate report coming to you on that subject as part of the 2021 audit plan, but it will be delivered in 21-22. The financial systems, which is a key part of our work, we've looked at employee-related expenditure, the collection fund and contract monitoring as part of this phase of work. There's no concerns in any of those areas from a transactional point of view. In terms of employee-related expenditure, there have been some underlying issues with Oracle Cloud. We do place reliance on the Cornwall Council operations and the services teams that run that to ensure that the underlying data is correct. We've taken that into account in our work, and we're satisfied, having sort of tested individual payments within the RC payroll, that there are no issues that we need to be concerned about. There was one minor, and I do mean minor, one minor coding discussion where in our view, a payment to a member of staff was correct, but it was incorrectly classified. So it was earned, it just was in the wrong column. That's been agreed to be changed, so there's nothing to be concerned about. The collection fund essentially is managed for you by Cornwall Council, and they are a very effective service. They have been assessed as very effective, not just by us, but by external audit as well. So we've taken full reliance on their work. What we did do in relation to the collection fund was test the locally managed COVID-19 grants, and we had no issues at all with that work. So that was very satisfactory. Contract monitoring, again, generally, we're very satisfied with the way the contracts that we've reviewed have been monitored. There's always areas for improvement in contract monitoring. It's one of those things, and it depends on the contract and the nature of the work. The only issue we found is that the financial regulations, which we know are due for review, imply that, well, they state that there should be a contract register in place. There isn't. Well, there certainly isn't for everything, but there is the use of contract finder, which is effectively a register of all contracts over £5,000. So the way forward on that, I think, is for a discussion and agreement with management. It is not it's not a significant issue, but it is something that will be raised in the report. Waste and recycling, we did a review of waste and recycling. We're very comfortable with the controls in place at the moment to manage that in terms of what's in place. I mean, obviously, there's a new waste strategy coming through. That needs to be aligned, and they are looking to align with the sort of green agenda for the council and the litter strategy, which I think all makes sense. We made some observations on the strategy in terms of performance monitoring going forward, and the big issue, I think, though, is that if we want the waste strategy to be effective, there's a significant change effort going to be required. Otherwise, the potential impact or benefits of a new waste strategy will not be felt. And it should be considered as part of the wider sort of green strategy, because the more waste is, managed effectively, the less waste there will be left, and because it comes in with things like use of less plastics, use of so on and so forth. So there's a lot around it that needs to all come together. And then as an organisation, you do need to think about what performance monitoring you want in that space. And this has all been discussed with management, and management have agreed with what we've discussed and are working actively on implementing change now. So that should come through in the strategic documents going forward in that space. Electoral registration, you'll be pleased to know, work is still in progress. So far, and I've been given the current plans, I have no concerns about the electoral registration process and how that is working. I think it seems to be operating in line with guidance, and appropriate tools are being used. But this will always be a point-in-time review, and seeing as we have an election coming up, it will be, there will be some limitations to what I can do short of a 10-year election. And I can't do that because I'm doing Cornwall Councils. But yes, I am encouraged by the progress that's been made, so it's working pretty well. And I think there's certainly cooperation across the organisation to make sure that happens. Programme and project management is also an area of work in progress. There are examples of good practice around programme management in the Council of the Isles of Scilly. The intention, though, is to have a standard approach to project management across the council. This makes sense, and the proposals are out there, and I think it does need to be locally tailored. I have been looking at that, and I've got some thoughts that I will share with management, but I think overall the strategy is reasonable and it makes a lot of sense. But there's certainly some things that I've seen that I think are worth taking from individual projects on the islands and using more effectively. Counter fraud health check is also in progress. In this area, there are some, we look at the policies and procedures that are in place. Now, the ethics desktop review that was carried out already identified a number of policies and procedures that are out of date and need revision. So we take that into account when we're looking at this. But the overall sort of issue of being effective, having an effective counter-fraud attitude and strategy in place, there are some elements that we need to pick up on. This is an area that there's more work to do, so I can't really give you a view on it yet. But like I say, I think some of the framework is there, but there are other areas that we need to focus on. So I'm still working through that with officers. So rather than draw any more views on that, that's where I'll leave that one for now. And the final element of our current year plan was to develop an assurance map. That is for discussion with officers at the operational leadership team meeting in a couple of weeks, I believe. And the outcome of that was we will draw up an assurance map of the Council of the Isles of Scilly. It will identify where our controls are in respect of the significant risks that the Council faces. It will enable anyone who reviews that document to understand whether or not there's sufficient control in place, how effective those controls are, and whether or not further work is needed. It's a good tool for management, and it would also be very useful for you in terms of looking at overall the levels and effectiveness of control across the Council. And it's something that when we bring it to you in the next meeting, we'll sort of run through that as a specific output of the process. I think, Jason, we need to make sure that's clear in what we submit next time. So that's the work. The work is still ongoing, and we will be reporting, as Jason said, by the end of the financial year. I'm pretty comfortable with the fact that we will achieve that. So we will continue to work towards that. I need to engage with some of the officers about some key points, but we are definitely on track. Jason referred to the fact that we have a proposed audit plan for 2021-22. This has been discussed and agreed with officers in principle, but as Jason also said, it's extremely flexible in terms of what we can do for the organisation and how that is delivered. There are some areas, though, where we are expected under the public sector internal audit standards to carry out some work annually. That includes risk management, corporate governance, and over-court controls. So those three areas are all in our plan, but the nature of what we do within those areas can vary. So I think it's key to recognise that although we're talking about here, for example, with enterprise risk management, looking at risk throughout the organisation, if it's felt that there's a more significant area we could work on, we can adapt to that. Same with governance and the core financial processes. I think there's perhaps less, because what we're planning to do around that is we're going to use data analytics to review your transactions across payroll, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and provide assurance, theoretically based on 100% assurance, depending on how access to data and reporting, over all your transactions. So ultimately you can say that everything that's in your books is correct. As long as it's been, every transaction in your books is correct. There may well be issues in terms of posting, but that's going to be outside the scope of what we do. The other areas that we've included, because these points have been picked up in your risk registers, the larger one is about corporate resilience and sustainability. This will also include business continuity management. These are key themes that we picked up through the risk registers in terms of concerns. The most recent SIPFA Sustainability Index has you as being very sustainable. I can't bring that information here. I do have it, but I think the issue we have with the Isles of Scilly is it only takes, I think, one incident, and it could push you completely over because of the size and the scope of what you have. So I think a piece of work looking at that across the organisation will help to identify and assure the organisation in terms of what's in place and how well your plans are in case of issue. And obviously, I think there's benefit from that. And from my perspective, usually business continuity management is one of those areas where we all know we should do it, and we all should have a plan in place, and we might well have a plan in place, but we've probably never tested it, and it's sat on the shelf and has gotten rather dusty with age, and is not used. So it's an important thing to sort of bring up, because it is something that is becoming increasingly relevant, and COVID has proved the need for having something effective in that space. We will obviously have time to follow up on previous findings and report that back to you. I'm hoping that we can use some technology we have to enable officers to feed directly into us about how they're progressing. It's something we use for Cornwall Council, so we can then produce reports off our system for you, which show progress against agreed actions. Jason has mentioned the Charter and Strategy. These are, again, they're requirements under the public sector internal audit standards that we have them. I think it's important for you to know and understand what these documents are, not least of all because within strategy we talk about performance measures. These are an opportunity for you to understand and hold us to account in terms of our performance. We do aim to achieve this on an annual. That's a scary finger. We do aim to achieve this with every one of our engagements. The documents themselves are standard. There's a lot of standardised language in them, but we have tried to make them specific to the Isles of Scilly. Through discussion, we've agreed that our sort of liaison point for our performance will be through the operational leadership team, and we will present our performance to them, which will then flow through into performance monitoring for you. Overall, the strategy and the God, I've lost the word. Charter. Sorry, my brain has gone. It's sitting at home in the kitchen. I apologise. Provide a framework within which we work. So it's important to have them. We will review them on a regular basis, and that will take into account any changes to the way things are run and the organisation. So that's where we are. Where I think from an audit perspective, we're in a good place. And as I say, the results so far are in auditing terms, acceptable. Because we never say it's really good, because that's just wrong. So we're very comfortable and satisfied with what we've seen so far, but we'll reserve final conclusions to when we complete all the work. So thank you.
You're muted, Apple.
Sorry, do we have... Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Councillor Martin.
So far, got one question when it goes. Considering what we've been talking about previously, and the whole smart islands and carbon neutral aspect that we're working towards. Is there a plan? How do we know that we're doing that correctly? Has internal audit got a part to play in that, in terms of calculating that cost, making sure those calculations are fine? What is, how does that work in terms of you guys?
My view on that, Councillor Marcus, would be we have looked at that project before. A lot of what you said should be there's a management responsibility to ensure that those things are in place. And I would expect our view on that would be and provide assurance over the sort of transactions and the way things are working, calculations. It can be done. It's just a case of whether or not you need that extra assurance should management have fulfilled their role and delivered across that. And I think that's something that we would need to sort of discuss in detail with management before we sort of committed to doing that. And I see Paul has got his hand up, so I assume he's got a response.
Thank you, Chairman. It was only just to say, Dan, in response to your point, is that quite a lot of the calculations around carbon, including carbon accounting, and the way that works on budgets is still in its infancy. And at last count, I think there are about 4 or 5 different approaches to carbon measurement, etc. But absolutely, it's key that we need to get it right. There's a number of different schemes kicking around, but I am trying to keep us close to the Cornwall Council team, who've got a lot of expertise in carbon accounting. And I know before Andy Brown, who was the 151 officer for Cornwall Council, left and Tracy Langley took over, there was an agreement that Cornwall Council would seek to work nationally on how to do carbon accounting in terms of its budget setting. So there's a lot of detailed work that needs to go on in there, Dan. It is in its infancy, but we will be coming to members, as Nicola said in her earlier report on Smart Islands, coming to members with a carbon and climate change action plan for council, and part of that would be how we measure it and what the baselines are wherever we can find them.
Yeah, I'm just aware that we are, one of the leading councils in waste production now in the UK. Not a chart that we want to be top of. But, yeah, it'd be just really good, and we are a carbon-heavy community, just with the nature of where we are. So it'd be good to get assurance that we are doing the right thing, that we're not catching up in 5 years' time.
Absolutely.
With any surprises.
Absolutely.
On the actual report as well, it's really good to get performance indicators in there. That's really helpful, so we can audit the auditors, which is always a good thing. And yeah, that's it really from me. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillor Sims.
Yes, thank you very much for all this, and it's really heartening that there's not that many questions to ask you, because I think we've gone past the point from rebuilding the house now to just decorating it, because it's the improvement over the last, well, since this whole kind of sort of council now started 6 years ago, has been massive. And just with respect to waste and recycling, it's in the same situation now. It's consolidating the enormous gains we've made, and I've just signed off a press release about a new project, which I'm sure you'll all see later on. So, yeah, thank you for your input, and I'm just really heartened. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sims. Bob.
Thank you, Chairman. If the member debate kind of concluded this, just a point of clarification to the recommendation 2 there, because I think Jason in his introduction is actually we're asked to note rather than approve the internal audit charter.
Okay.
Is that correct, Jason?
Apologies. It is to note the charter.
It is okay. Thanks very much.
To note the charter and to note the strategy. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sims. Oh, gone. Right, okay. But the recommendations that members note the internal audit 2020 to 21 audit findings to date as presented in Appendix A to this report, including Annex B, internal audit strategy, that members note the internal audit charter as Annex A of Appendix A to this report, that members note the audit plan for 2021-22 as set out in Appendix A to this report. Could I have a proposer, please?
Yes, I'll propose that with those amendments, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Seconder, Councillor Sims. Thank you. Sorry, my screen is frozen. Anybody against? Thank you very much, and thank you very much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Right, we go to agenda item 7, the work plan. Could I ask Bob, please, to take this item?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. I'll take the report as read. There's in paragraph 3, though, I'll just update the committee on that. In terms of the review of the Scrutiny Committee terms of reference, those have now been drafted, and what we'll do, because they weren't ready in time for publication with this agenda, we'll circulate them to the committee members after this meeting for comment ahead of the Democratic Processes panel meeting.
Right, thank you, Bob. Has anybody got any questions about the work plan? No? Okay.
Yeah, Chairman, just one.
Councillor Smith.
Just wonder if you give us an update on Freight Part 2.
I was waiting for that one, Councillor Smith. I think
it's a good game to play, isn't it?
Yes, I think Councillor Watt has a little update on that.
Well, very tiny, Chairman. The only update is that I've been in touch with Councillor Legg, and
right.
I have had some thoughts on it. However, it's only just under 2 years, I think, since the last survey went out, which was basically about the steamship company, if members remember. Whereas the possible future report would be on freight in general, such as the mainland providers, such as Hermes, DPD, and so on, which would be a different beast altogether, because it would mean a more wide-ranging survey, because it affects everybody, not just specifically from the steamship company. So, still giving that some thought. So that's all I can say at the moment.
Okay, we shall look forward to your thoughts. Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
Yes, sorry, Bob. One of the things that was meant to come up with this meeting was the authorisation to appoint a second independent person. Is that going to next meeting?
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. No, that was there. The monitoring officer asked me to check back on the previous appointment or recommendations, where following the kind of annual standards report from the then monitoring officer, Matt Stokes, the authorisation was given to the monitoring officer to pursue the appointment of no less than 2 independent persons. So actually that authorisation is in place.
Right, so we don't need to worry about that. That's done, dusted.
Correct.
Done, dusted. Thank you, Councillor. Any more questions? Could I have a proposer for the recommendations of the work plan be approved, subject to any amendments made by the committee?
I'm happy to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Sims.
I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Lake. Anybody against? Thank you. We now go to part 2, which is for information only. So thank you all very much for attending, and I'd like to close the meeting.
Avril, could I just come in a second?
Yes, certainly.
Nothing really, well, it's not particularly to do with the meeting. I just wonder if everybody's aware that Matt Hancock sent Derek Thomas a letter dated the end, congratulating Helston Primary Care Network on our vaccines, and particularly mentioned St Mary's. So that's really, I just thought I'd put a thank you in at the first possible council opportunity. Brilliant.
Yes, very good. Thank you. Right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Chair.